Hi, subscribe for the more true scary stories. Story 1. That's what the formerly demon-possessed man said. He meant it for everyone, but he pointed at just one person, me. Lending gravity to his infernal tale of woe was the pentagram tattoo on his neck and the sixes across all of his knuckles. Pastor Cam introduced him as an ex-devil worshiper named Pat. Pat looked, however, like he'd lied about giving up Satan. Finding Christ came with a wardrobe change and a makeover. No? He paced the orange carpet in the musty church basement, leaving dark footprints from the dirt on his motorcycle boots. I watched my mom try to kill herself with our old furnace. He didn't explain how. Having limited knowledge of furnaces, I pictured someone cramming their body into a fiery opening. A demon appeared to me on the basement stairs as I listened to heavy metal and took drugs. The vague way he referenced the music and his altered state made him less convincing. He sounded like an after-school special or PSA between cartoons on a Saturday. I couldn't touch a Bible or look at one. Going inside a church burned my skin. Since we were in one, I assumed his discomfort had ended. Throwing a Bible at him and yelling, "Catch!" would probably be frowned upon. Chelsea wouldn't like it. Coming back to the youth group on Fridays had been her idea. I took it as a prerequisite and a condition of our carnal relationship, which had begun a week ago at school. We kissed at the dance, and I almost touched her bra. It had gone no further than that. She worried for our eternal souls. I wasn't sure we had any, but didn't want to pressure her and become the known creep of the community. Christians are funny. Because they give themselves the option to repent and be redeemed, they do all the things they think they shouldn't. It wasn't the atheist girls having premarital sex and babies, a paradox that worked for an opportunistic asshole like a teenage boy. So I agreed to come and even thought Pat might be interesting when the youth pastor announced the guest speaker of the night. He seemed confused and mentally ill. I felt sorry for him, and then I was impatient. We were going to the fast food burger joint I don't need to name because you know it and have probably eaten there. You'll understand why I don't name it. I don't want any legal trouble. Satan is real, Pat said, leading to a final statement. He's real. He takes many forms. Your father, your mom, your brothers, Yogi Bear, Super Mario. You'll know it's the devil when he's coming for you. That's when he pointed at me and breathed heavily, wheezing almost, and my face became uncomfortably warm from the unexpected scrutiny in the room. I smiled and looked for support, but everyone looked worried. "Thank you, Pat," Pastor Cam said, clapping a few times and then giving up when the silent tension would not relent. Pat sat down in the back row of chairs. The pastor started a prayer to conclude the evening. I snuck a look at Pat and found him staring right at me. He looked sweaty and trembled with a secret delight revealed only by the hint of a smile. I quickly looked away. "Amen," the pastor concluded. "Have a good night, kids. Be safe." We milled around for a few moments, confirming plans to meet up at that burger place. I tried to keep an eye out for Pat because the dude was clearly fixated on me. I do have a tendency to wear my thoughts on my face. He probably noticed I wasn't buying his crazy story fragments. He remained in the back row seats. He hadn't stopped watching me. I shrugged at him like, "What the hell?" Chelsea tugged my arm and I looked away. "Come on, we're going." I acknowledged her with a nod. In the brief distraction, Pat disappeared. What a jokey. He was trying to scare me. Too bad I couldn't convince myself he hadn't. The night turned frosty. Paul, the weird kid, fidgety as the formerly possessed, made of the lame yoki about smoking, posing his fingers and breathing asthmatically. Nobody laughed. The crunch of boots on a thin layer of snow marked a grim journey to that burger place. It was too cold for etiquette. As the seven of us crossed the street from church to the edge without a sidewalk, the streetlight above went out. We didn't remark on it until we left the vicinity of predicted illumination. It went back on. "Spooky," Paul said, laughing like he'd told another joke. It became spooky when we reached the next streetlight. It went out too. We stopped, uncertain what to make of the mildly interesting phenomenon. Chelsea took my hand and squeezed. "Let's keep going. It's cold." More like, Let's keep going because I'm scared. I didn't mind so long as she kept holding on to me. Again, the light resumed when we were outside its casted glow. The next block contained mostly mud and unfinished houses from some development gone sour. Streetlights here were fewer, only 2. Yet, they were enough to unnerve us with sudden malfunctions. "This is too weird," Paul said. He wasn't laughing anymore. His dumb face looked thoughtful. "Can we try something? Leave one at a time?" "No and no," I said, moving along and inadvertently cooperating. I was the only one to go. Chelsea had stopped holding my hand, and I guess I'd been distracted by the mystery lights. The circular bugle of electric sight blessed the 6 still beneath it. "It's you," Paul accused without regret and more than a little delight. I was an outsider to the youth group. Chelsea had stopped going to the church before I met her. None of the boys were happy to see her return with a new guy. "Sure it is," I said, unnerved and trying not to show it. "Let's go." The group started moving. Chelsea touched my arm. "Go back to the light." "What?" "Go back. I want to see." "Come on, can we—" "I want to see," she insisted. "Fine." I marched back to the light and started thrashing, gripping my throat. "It burns. It burns. Oh, the pain." The others laughed. Chelsea did not. Nothing happened to the streetlight. It stayed on. When the next one went out, nobody commented, and we kept walking. On Rock Church Road, there were no streetlights until that burger place, and those were already flickering. A lot of the restaurants had undergone extensive renovations to appear more like coffee shops. Not this one, though. This one looked forgotten in the midst of a developer's hell. Fields of mud surrounded it, staked out for houses that hadn't even started construction. More remnants from economic stagflation. We were only going to that burger place because it was within walking distance. Plus, it was on the way home for both Chelsea and I. Now that we'd arrived, however, I didn't feel like going in. "Want to go home instead?" I asked her. She frowned. "Fellowship with Christians is important." I relented, of course, and tried to pass off the suggestion as a joke. She didn't look like she bought it. Inside, Pastor Cam surprised us with soft-serve cones on his youth pastor's salary, 21 cones for $21. The bulk of the youth group had traveled by car. I was glad for the free ice cream. I only had $5 in my wallet, enough for one happy meal. Fortunately, the cone sufficed for Chelsea. The deep fried air felt thick, heavy. Breathing it couldn't be calorie-wise. A number of track lights had spent bulbs, creating a dull atmosphere, punctuated obnoxiously with blue pools of sterile illumination. We in the shadows looked ill. Those beneath the stark light appeared insane. All of us struggled to sit comfortably on hard plastic benches and chairs. I hated that burger place in general. This one, in case my description wasn't clear, I loathed. I tried not to look like I wanted to leave. We took a table at the end and observed the cavorting teens. They told jokes and shot spitballs, while a tired-looking employee appealed to the pastor for proper behavior. I agreed with the employee. The group was full of awkward nerds bound by vague religious ideas. Outside of the church, at school, they were quiet outcasts. I preferred them that way. Even Chelsea seemed embarrassed. "Could be worse," I whispered. "Could be other people here." Aside from the employees, which were few, I only saw 2. Our youth group members were the only patrons. I jumped when that changed. A heavy thud against the window presented 2 oversized white gloves. That clown, that one, stared at us. The one you're thinking of, the trademarked man with red hair and a maw of grinning crimson. He belonged to that burger place ideologically, but had no business appearing in the flesh at a random franchise in the middle of the night. No cars but Pastor Cam's were in the parking lot. That clown arrived on foot. The group, the employee too, watched as he grinned and pressed his nose against the glass, which frosted quickly to obscure and distort his colorful features into something sinister. Before I could act on the urge to tell the employee to lock the door, that clown flung it open, creating a vacuum that sucked the breath from the dining area. With his big shoes, he stomped into our midst, aggressively shrouded sweat steaming from his skin. Heat emanated from him, and an anger fixed his expression permanently into revulsion. An attack was imminent, I was sure. But then he saw me. Latent rage became further buried under a lazy smile. He extended his glove to shake, and with the other, dug around in his yellow coveralls, presenting a limp balloon, a prize for my expected camaraderie. I shook my head. No thanks. He handled the rejection well, and spun away to the others who found an unexpected clown in the night more fascinating than scary. Paul shook his hand enthusiastically and looked at me like he'd won a race. That clown looked too, and every time he got a handshake from another. Even Pastor Cam thought it was funny. He quickly accepted the balloons, stuffing them into his jean pocket. Chelsea accepted his hand reluctantly and simply put the flaccid balloon on the table beside her napkins. I could see the employee on his phone talking about that clown to a manager, probably. Nobody expected or wanted a clown in the night. When he offered his hand to me again, his mouth was open slightly, as if he were out of breath. All this time he hadn't said a word. That nobody found that weird speaks to the quality of the company. Shake his hand, Paul encouraged. Come on. That clown waited. I crossed my arms. I would not relent. Shake his hand, Pastor Cam said, starting a chorus of shake it, shake it, shake it. Centered out, I began to feel the pressure to just give in and move on with life. But then I looked into his eyes. What color are that clown's eyes? I bet you don't know and never did. I do, however. I learned that night, and I'll never forget. No, I said, maybe a little too loudly. The chant stopped. He didn't move, though. Neither did the white glove. I'm not shaking your hand. Now piss off. It was the send-off that incurred the vocal disapproval of the group. Pastor Cam started some admonishment I couldn't make out with all the noise. I stood up and pushed by the clown. I'm going, I told Chelsea. You coming? Because she hesitated, I quite unfairly left her behind. I left my girlfriend at that burger place and regretted it before reaching the end of the parking lot. When I turned around, she was leaving that burger place with another group of kids. I think she saw me. She wouldn't acknowledge my presence, though. I was too much of a stubborn idiot to apologize in front of others. I began the long walk home alone. It was 40 minutes along Rock Church Road to my neighborhood, but longer to my house because of the forest remnant on the south side blocking the park. Walking through the woods at night? No thanks. I planned to pass the forest via Gorth Street, the only intersection with vehicular access to my survey. Apparently, the closed design made the area crime-proof. Plenty of houses still got robbed, however. The thieves just came on foot. The stretches between streetlights were long. I stepped into the first with the expectation that it might snuff out. When it didn't, I felt relieved and focused on a real problem. How to apologize to Chelsea and get her back. Passing beyond another row of unfinished houses, the land opened into fields gone wild. These were farms about 10 years ago, bought up by hopeful developers but never put to use. The next closest structure ahead was the namesake of the road. Rock Church no longer held services, and the old stone walls had crumbled into ruin. Still, the freezing wind had nothing stopping it. My ears and fingertips burned. As a cool person, I rarely wore a hat and mitts. Stopping within the dark hollow of the abandoned church to warm up seemed like a good idea. I huddled into the corner of 2 remaining walls and breathed into my cupped hands. That's when I saw the first streetlight, where the houses ended and the road split the fields turn off. I squinted through a fresh swath of flurries. Watery eyes blurred my vision. I couldn't see very far. The streetlight blinked back to life. I continued watching. Uncertainty became full-blown fear when, a few moments later, the next streetlight snuffed out. I stood up, feeling trapped in the corner of the ruined church. Silently, I cursed the frozen grass as my shoes crunched to the sidewalk. Like an idiot in a horror movie, I tried looking back and walking at the same time. These sidewalks were older than my dad and never maintained. An edge from the undulating slabs of concrete caught my heel. Down I went, and the next closest streetlight shut off. They were near. I saw limbs stalking, flailing, walking with an unfortunately familiar intensity. He stepped into the lit pool I'd spilled onto, snuffing it out. I scrambled backward and failed to get up as the shadow loomed. I shut my eyes and his breath coated my face, the grease-laden air of that burger place. "Leave me alone," I whimpered. When the foul stench relented, I forced myself to look. He hadn't left, and the streetlight came back. That clown held out his glove for a handshake. Sweat had smeared his makeup. The red rim around his mouth dribbled like blood onto his yellow jumpsuit. The swell of light around us began to diminish and flicker. He blinked rapidly, in time, and I knew he willfully powered the streetlight, as if such a creature could not exist long where others could see. It offered its hand. It only wanted a handshake. I reached to obey even when I knew it wasn't true. Much more would be given if I relented. Maybe everything. "No," I said quietly. That clown crouched lower and pushed the glove under my nostrils. Writhing worms rippled beneath the fabric, scarcely containing the stench of decay. Burger meat, not worms. Moving strands of ground beef, roiled into form, held by an idea, some acknowledgement given by the reluctant handshakes of the living. I can't say where these ideas came from, except possibly that clown itself. I'm just not that creative or depressed. "Shake my hand," it said, without moving its slightly parted lips. The voice, it should be noted, was nothing like the real thing. It was deeper and raspy, almost like a whisper with the last syllable drawn out until the increasing snowfall absorbed the sound. "Shake it. Shake my hand." "No, leave me alone." For a moment it froze. Then it opened its mouth fully to allow a purplish tongue to unfurl over rotted teeth. Yellowish Mountain Dew tears drove canals through white makeup cheeks. It wept and looked to the waning streetlight above. "You must shake my hand," it said, again without air, without lungs. When its gaze returned to me, I saw the color of its eyes once more. Death was the price of resistance. I knew it. The light went out. That clown could no longer maintain its camouflage, so it had to return to its natural habitat, the dark. Without the oppression of a horrific visual, my instincts to survive seemed to reboot. I scrambled backward and turned into a flat-out sprint down Rockchurch. Shadowy trees swayed invitingly in the distance. I could be home in 5 minutes, maybe less if I cut through the woods. Another extinguished light behind me obliterated any hesitancy to go in there. Secret skeletal branches threatened to impede my escape. But when the stench of that clown increased, I screamed and flailed and defied the call to stop and shake that fucking clown's hand. My sense of where my house stood failed me. I popped out of the woods on Rockchurch again. That clown showed itself with the briefest ignition of the nearest streetlight. It laughed, or I did as I despaired into madness. The forest wasn't so large. I picked a point ahead, a porch light, and went for it. I was so close. I could see the failure of the trees to stand against the encroaching homes and the park no one seemed to use. Its footsteps closed fast. Velvety fingertips lightly grazed the back of my neck. "Oh shit! God! Help!" I ranted. We fell at the same time. I from its barest touch and the acceptance of being unable to continue running. It from some chance infirmity in the ground or something more divine. I opened my eyes. That clown lay over a narrow tree stump, impaled beneath its ribs and stuck. It writhed, a bulbous insect pinned by the collector. Confused by circumstances it could not understand. True blood overwhelmed the red makeup mouth and stained the light snow. I got to my feet, waiting to see it die. That clown's glove shot out toward me. I flinched, and when I looked back, it was looking at me, no longer fearsome, but sad, pathetic. Unbelievably, I felt pity for that clown. Even after it had chased me and grossed me out with its smell and freakish body, I began to wish it hadn't come to impalement. It was relief found in hindsight. I know because I strongly regret what I did next. I knelt by the clown to pray. I'd never prayed before. I didn't believe in God. So this was pretty dumb, as its breath ran out and the eyes stared at the world beyond. I did the only thing left I could think of to honor that clown. I took its limp hand in mine and finally gave in. That clown died, and I left its body. No police came knocking. No news stories were written or shared on social media. I know why now. Because I shook its hand, and now I can't touch the Bible. And the church burns like Pat said it would.
Like and subscribe for the more scary stories. Story 2. It all started with a pothole. I trashed my car, and I didn't have the money to fix it. Without transportation, I risked losing my job, and without my job, I would need to drop out of school. I knew how risky a payday loan would be, so I did something that turned out to be a far worse idea. I borrowed money from a friend. I've known Josh for years. He was always bouncing between jobs and different hobbies. Once he got sort of good at something, he would move on to the next thing. I envied him for having such a free lifestyle. I should have known better than to ask him for help. He was a good guy to his friends, but overall, a bit of a pain to deal with. I still owed him a few $100s when he called me to offer a deal. "Hey, could you be my camera guy this weekend? I'll call us even if you do," Josh said over the phone. "Camera guy? Are you trying to make an indie movie or what?" I asked, knowing with him it was possible. "Nah, I'm into streaming. I want to do some pranks for April Fools." I rolled the idea in my head. I didn't like prank videos, so I didn't watch them very often. I'd seen a few, and I really hated the kinds of idiot streamers that cause problems for others and claimed it being a prank as a poor defense. And now I might get suckered into being one of them. "You're going to get your ass kicked," I told him. "I'm just going to be spraying holy water on people. It's harmless." I paused, letting those words sink in. "You stole some holy water?" I asked, shocked. "I didn't steal it. It's there for anyone to take. Come on, man, I got no one else. And you do owe me." I groaned at the idea. Doing this would be nothing but a huge embarrassing mess. But I hoped I could reel Josh in from doing anything too crazy. A few $100s for a day's worth of work. I was glad that my friend didn't care about money that much. I agreed, already hating myself. We met in a busy area of the city. The weather was warm, and a bunch of families were out enjoying the weather. Josh took the time to explain how the streaming program worked on his phone. I just needed to keep the camera pointed toward him and carry the extra spray bottle of the stolen holy water. Josh started the stream and greeted his followers. I honestly don't remember anything he said. His brain was going a mile a minute. It was as if he was scared to have even a second of silence on the stream and started to rapidly fire questions that meant nothing. I felt my attention get drawn elsewhere. I wanted to be at home, not dealing with this. The thought of the money I owed him kept me there. His first target was a pretty girl walking hand in hand with her boyfriend. Josh had hidden between two stores and sprayed the back of her head. She flinched and felt the new wet spot in her hair. She looked around, not spotting the culprit. This was stupid. His chat was moving, but slowly. They were telling him to get bolder next time. He had his phone on him and read their suggestions. The next guy he targeted was someone twice his size. At first, he claimed to need directions. When the guy let his guard down, Josh brought out the spray bottle and got a few hits into his victim's face. He started to run but was caught within a second. My stomach rolled and teetaned as I watched my friend rightfully get screamed at. Josh played dumb while making all sorts of jokes, not taking things seriously. I really thought he was going to get his ass kicked, so I turned the phone off and get in the middle. It took 3 solid minutes of apologizing to get Josh released. I dragged him away. My friend's face was red. At first, I assumed he was embarrassed, but no, he was angry at me. "What the hell is your problem? You stopped the stream at the best part," he said, barely keeping his voice below a shout. "You were going to get your face beaten in," I hissed back. "Good. A black eye is great for views." I shoved him, angry over what I was hearing. When did he become so stupid? "Views aren't worth any of this. Can you pay me back the money you owe right now, or not?" That didn't have anything to do with our conversation, but Josh made things crystal clear. After today, I was cutting ties with him. I did not want to be associated with someone who thought internet points were worth acting like an ass. He started the stream again and claimed I had dropped the phone. People called him out for lying, but he got things back on track. To make up for bailing on an exciting part, he picked out a special new target. His eyes landed on another couple. The girl was pretty and had long black hair. She wore a black dress and sorta leaned a little into the goth fashion. Her boyfriend wore a suit as if he'd just got off work or they were on a very special date. He looked handsome in a way most people would never be able to achieve. I've known male friends who had done dumb biting exercises to have a jawline like that. Josh knew that those two would be perfect. Some people loved seeing others better looking or richer than them getting their day ruined. Joch got ready and then ran at them with the spray bottle out, screaming, "The power of Christ compels you." It startled a lot of onlookers. He appeared to be someone with a lot of mental problems attacking a random couple for no reason. The girl acted first. For some reason, she took the hit and stepped in front of her boyfriend so he wouldn't get sprayed. A scream tore through the air before Josh was able to say it was just a prank. I was a few feet behind him, so I clearly saw what happened next. Dark red burns appeared where the water made contact with her skin. She yowled like an injured animal. The sound caused most people on the street to look in her direction or back away. She raised a hand to her face, but it was too late. Flames sprouted from her skin, and within seconds, her entire body had been engulfed. Her boyfriend took off his jacket to cover her, desperate to save his girlfriend. She collapsed to the ground, her body smoldering, then slowly turning to ash. I was in shock from the horror of the event. The man sank to his knees, distraught over his girlfriend dying so suddenly. He raised his head towards Josh, who still had the spray bottle in his hand. A dumb expression was on his face. I bet he thought someone was playing a prank on him. The man's face changed. His eyes flashed red out of pure hatred as all his teeth transformed into jagged points. He lunged forward to dig those teeth into Josh's neck. With one swift movement, he ripped a hunk of flesh away, causing a fountain of blood to stain the streets. People were screaming, and I wasn't even aware. I still held the camera upwards, getting all this live on stream. As my friend collapsed dead on the street, the monster turned his attention to me. I was tackled to the ground, and the only thing that kept me alive was grabbing the spare spray bottle and holding it upwards, ready to unleash the harmful liquid onto the monster, pinning me down. "Who do you work for?" he shouted, spraying specks of blood onto my face. "No one! It was just a prank!" I shouted back, voice shaking. A surprised look came over his face. "You're dead." He said so coldly, it froze my blood. My finger twitched and sprayed a little bit of the holy water on the side of his neck. He screamed, and his hand flew over the spot. Burns appeared as smoke poured through his fingers. He shot up and ran off down the street, leaving me behind, alive, but with a lot of questions. I needed to see if this was all real. I looked at the stream to see if the chat was talking about what just happened, or if I had somehow imagined it. Only 30 people had been viewing the stream. Almost all of them were saying it was fake and asked how we pulled something like that off. Soon the cops arrived and I was pushed into the back of a car. I didn't speak to anyone. If they wanted to know what happened, they would look at the stream logs. I didn't want to believe monsters were real, and I doubted the police would if I told them. But Josh was dead, and it appeared I was going to be blamed for that. I was in lockup for 3 days when I was requested to meet with my new lawyer. I sat in a small gray room at a steel table, still reeling from witnessing Josh's death. I bet my other lawyer quit because I refused to talk to him. A man came into the room. His hair was dark and slicked back. His suit probably cost more than what I earned in a year. Scratch then, his shoes probably cost more than what I made in a year. His suit cost more than I would make in 5 years. There was no way this guy was going to work with me. Good news, I've reviewed the case, and you'll most likely either get a very minor sentence or nothing at all, he said in an upbeat tone. "No," I shouted, my hands shaking at the idea. He was taken aback by my outburst, but quickly recovered. "I'll say anything you want. Just let me stay in jail for as long as possible. If I get out, that monster will kill me." Those red eyes and sharp teeth haunted me every waking second. If there was one of them, then how many more could there be? What was I dealing with? A vampire? Something more powerful? So far, no one had threatened me in my cell. I wanted to keep it that way. "Why do you think we're ensuring your release?" he said, face bright, and his tone did not match the threat. I sank down into the hard chair, feeling so small and powerless. My teeth chattered from fear, realizing I was across from yet another monster. "It was just a prank," I weakly protested. "A prank that led to death, and you broadcast our existence to the world. It may have only been a small number of people, but there is now a risk to the ones who hunt us to realize holy water removes our sunscreen. Do you have any idea how much time and money it'll take to fully cover all this up, and how many of our kind will be killed because of your actions?" Do you really think a simple prison sentence is enough of a punishment? I swallowed hard. The monster, hidden behind a human face, smiled at me, enjoying how much I was mentally squirming. When am I going to be released? I asked in a small voice. Who knows? You know the court system. It could be tomorrow, it could be 5 months from now. I'll keep seeing you to give some updates. Take care of yourself until then, and don't get any ideas. People are keeping an eye on you, so trying to check out early will just cause you more problems. He stood up and gave my shoulder a small pat before leaving the room. I thought I would be sick. I was guided back to my cell and to be alone with my thoughts. Knowing the day I would die might have been kinder. Any noise outside made me think it was someone finally coming to the end of things. It was just a damn prank, but I should have known better. We ruined so many lives, and for what? A few comments and views? Even if Josh got the attention he wanted, it wouldn't be worth it. Nothing was worth what we did. I wonder if I let them know I fully understand the harm my actions caused, they might let me live. Right now, all I had was time to think through possible outcomes for my future. And not very many good ideas are coming to mind.
Story 3. My mother, Leanne, was something of the black sheep in her family. Being the eldest of 5 siblings, and my grandmother being a single mother, meant that my mom had a lot of responsibility thrust on her at a very young age. She went through a rebellious stage, moving across the country with her fiancé against the family's wishes. This took place in 1991, 1 year before I was born. My mother moved to Tennessee with her fiancé Keith. Keith was a painter and worked in construction, and my mother struggled to find a job in a completely new place, cut off from family and friends. They didn't have very much money, so when looking for a place to live, they had to settle for what they could get. The house was in an average neighborhood and wasn't very impressive. It was 2 stories with 2 bedrooms upstairs, but the place had been mid-renovation. Keith had agreed to fix up the house in exchange for lower rent. My mother told me that the first time she noticed something strange was the very first time they pulled up in the driveway. Keith was showing her the house to make sure she liked it before finalizing the paperwork. When he parked the car, my mother saw a girl in the window upstairs, staring at them through a gap in the curtains. The girl had brown hair and was wearing white, but my mother couldn't see more than that. She turned and asked, "Are the owners here to show us around?" Keith had laughed. "Show us around what? It's a small house." When she tried to point out the girl to Keith, there was nothing there at all. Keith, of course, thought she was only trying to scare him. My mother, being a realist and non-superstitious, believed it must have been a trick of the light. They eventually agreed to rent the place and moved in. This is where the real creepiness begins. There were a few small things they noticed at first. Sometimes, early in the morning, the kitchen would smell strongly of bacon and coffee, as though someone had just finished cooking. Sometimes a door would swing shut, but they believed this to be because the house was rather old and drafty. The smaller of the 2 bedrooms upstairs, my mother referred to as the cold room, because it was always freezing, even though it was frequently unused and had the windows closed and locked. This is the room that my mother thought she had seen a girl standing in when they first arrived. There was a small door to a crawl space with an old-fashioned crystal knob that had been painted over and would not open. Finally, there was a section of the wall upstairs that was missing as part of the renovations. It instead had a thick piece of plywood cut to fit the gap and sealed up tight. The plywood set into the gap in wall continually fell out. Keith duct-taped the edges, and it still fell out. They pressed heavy boxes up against it, and it still fell out. You could hear it drop heavily from downstairs, and my mother said this quickly, moved from annoying to disturbing. Beyond the plywood was a gap in the space between the walls, with nothing but wiring, but big enough to be a small closet. My mom said it was too dark to see much, and they just fixed the plywood back in place each time it fell. Within weeks of moving there, the two of them began fixing up the place. One day, my mother was cleaning the downstairs bathroom, on her knees scrubbing the tub, while Keith was outside working. As she was cleaning, she felt someone pinch her butt. Living with her fiancé, she laughed and turned, hoping to catch him, only to find no one there. Believing that Keith must have been hiding in the hallway, she started talking to him. "Oh, I wonder who that could have been," she said sarcastically. "You do know I'm busy in here, like you should be too." She returned to cleaning. Again she felt a pinch on her butt, and she quickly turned only to find no one there. "You think you're so smart, don't ya?" she'd asked. "Well, I'll catch you next time." This time, she kept cleaning, but bent over far enough that she could see down between her legs. She planned to see him creep around the corner and quickly grab his ankle before he could escape. But when she next felt the sharp pinch, there was no one there. My mother was horrified by this and quickly got up and ran outside. Keith was on a ladder fixing something. When he saw her, he laughed. "Weren't so sneaky this time, were you? You know it's dangerous to tease a man while he's working." "I could fall and break my back," he'd said to her. Still scared, she quickly explained what had happened to her, and Keith replied that he'd felt something similar. He kept thinking she was reaching out of the doorway to pinch his butt. When they realized that neither of them had been teasing the other, my mom was very unsettled, but Keith was a country boy with little care for it all. "What? You think it's a ghost or something? Come on, Leanne. It's no big deal," he'd said. My mother finally conceded to ignoring it, but said she was suddenly aware of the house in a way she hadn't been before. She started to record the events that were happening. As time passed, more strange events piled up. In the cold room, there was a dartboard on the wall. Both Keith and my mother noticed that no matter where you left the darts in the room, upon returning they'd all be in the bullseye. They each thought it was the other one cleaning up, but quickly discovered it wasn't. Keith insisted on ignoring it, but my mother's inquisitive nature wouldn't allow that. While Keith was at work, she looked up things in magazines and books. She said that she read about leaving a notebook and a pencil out might allow ghosts to communicate. So she left a blank notebook and pencil in the cold room. Another feature of the cold room was a walk-in closet. She said that she was trying to find storage for some boxes. When she first opened it, there were a lot of old winter clothes hanging and no light inside, making it very dark. My mother reached into the closet, both arms outstretched, looking for the back wall so that she could figure out how many boxes she could fit in. She said she took 3 or 4 steps in, arms fully outstretched, the closet icy cold, and the light of the room behind her getting dimmer the farther she went in. She never felt a back wall. My mother suddenly got a bad feeling and quickly left the closet. She closed the door and never tried to enter it again. One last event that occurred in the cold room was when my mother was cleaning. She said it was mid-morning, and she was just tidying and checking the notebook. It was blank, and it had been long enough without a strange occurrence that she believed maybe it wasn't real after all. When she tried to leave the room, the door refused to open. My mother was locked inside She banged on the door, jiggled the knob, shoved her shoulder into it, but it wouldn't budge in the slightest. Remember, this is 1991. No cell phones, and there was no landline in that room. She was pissed off and annoyed at the old house, but said she wasn't scared. She sat by the window and waited, hoping Keith would come by on his lunch break. He didn't. She waited all day until nearly 5 p.m. when Keith finally returned. When she heard the front door, my mom began banging and yelling, "I'm in here! I'm in here!" to get his attention. Keith immediately came upstairs and asked what she was doing. "I'm locked inside," she shouted. "The door's locked and I can't get out." Keith, annoyed with the drama after a long day at work, reminded, "Leon, there's no lock on this goddamn door." My mother, equally annoyed with having been trapped all day, grabbed the knob to shake it, saying, "It's jammed." But as soon as she twisted the knob, the door opened as easy as anything. They apparently argued that night, my mother angry that Keith refused to believe her, instead blaming the event on a Cali girl not knowing how to shove open a door that stuck. The events up to this point had been creepy little irritations, but nothing truly terrifying. That changed after their 3rd month living there. Keith invited over his brother Daryl and his wife Amy, as well as Amy's friend Jennifer. The 5 of them were all drinking and having a good time. At one point, the 3 women were all in the kitchen discussing music while my mother was cutting up garlic bread. Daryl and Keith had been in the living room together when suddenly Daryl entered the kitchen. My mother remembers that Amy made a comment about Cher being one of the greatest artists ever, or something when out of nowhere, Daryl became livid. "Why are you talking about that slut? You want to be a whore just like her?" The 3 women were struck silent, confused at the man's temper over such an innocuous statement. According to my mom, Amy even laughed at first. "What the hell? Keep that up and you're on the couch tonight," she'd replied. Daryl was not joking. "You think I don't know what you do behind my back?" He yelled at her, and the 3 women all became aware this was deadly serious. "You're a fucking whore. You're a witch," Daryl shouted at her. Distraught, Amy at first tried to reason with him. "What the fuck are you talking about?" she demanded. "What's wrong with you?" Daryl grabbed the knife from the cutting board that my mother had been using, and Amy screamed. He threatened her, and my mother says she doesn't remember everything he was saying at this point, but none of it made sense. While Daryl had Amy cornered in the kitchen, ranting about babies and whores and making her pay, my mother ran to the living room to get Keith for help. He was asleep. Usually, Keith is an extremely light sleeper, my mother recounted. Since moving into this house, he'd been plagued by nightmares, and he woke at the slightest noise. Sure, he had been drinking, but not enough for him to pass out. This night, he would not wake. My mother said Daryl was yelling, and Amy was crying, and Jennifer was shouting about calling the cops. My mother was screaming into Keith's face and shaking him, even pulled him off the couch, but he just flopped to the ground, still completely asleep. My mother wasn't in the kitchen to see what happened next, but Jennifer apparently got Daryl's attention long enough for Amy to slip out of the corner and run. Daryl swung the knife after her and cut her arm. The women were crying and running. My mother ran with them into the downstairs bathroom and locked the door. Daryl was screaming at them and banging on the door. "I'll cut the devil right out of you," he shrieked, banging on the door so hard that it shook on its hinges. My mother was a thicker girl, and the window out of the bathroom was very narrow. Jennifer was thin enough to fit through, so while my mother pressed her back to the door to keep it closed, Amy helped Jennifer crawl outside. Jennifer managed to get to a neighbor and call the police. It took them about 10 minutes to arrive, during which my mother said she was terrified and sobbing. At this point, my mom had already been trying to get pregnant and wasn't sure if she was or not, making her even more afraid for her life. She said that Amy tried to speak reason to Daryl, asking why he was doing this, what she did wrong, asking him to please just stop, even apologizing. Daryl was beyond rationality. My mother said what made it so scary was that nothing he was saying even made sense. It seemed disjointed, threats about hellfire and accusations of cheating that were not in Daryl's character at all. He certainly wasn't the perfect husband. There had been some domestic disputes in the past, but nothing on the level of death threats. When the police arrived, they disarmed and arrested Daryl. There is an actual record of this, and my mother gave a statement about the event. She also said that as soon as Daryl stepped outside, within seconds, Keith woke up. He was groggy and asked what the hell happened. He was also questioned by the police, but had witnessed nothing. They assumed because of the alcohol that he'd passed out, but my mother knew better. My mother told me that after a few hours of holding, Daryl calmed down. The couple and their friend refused to ever return to that house. My mother said she asked Keith about his brother a few times, but that he didn't want to talk about it. She says she doesn't think Amy pressed charges, and she's not sure if Daryl went to jail over the whole thing. She did say she once tried to call Amy, only to have the other woman hang up on her. In their fourth and final month of stay at this house, Keith was working incessantly on trying to get the crawlspace door open. It was almost like a pet project of his. One Saturday, he woke early and began working on prying it open. He worked well into the afternoon, at which point my mother went to stop him. She told him to give up on the damn thing, that he was going to injure himself, and he needed to take a break. Keith agreed to take a break at least, and stood with her to go downstairs for lunch. My mother said that as soon as they were halfway down the stairs, they had a loud creak. They each froze before slowly turning around to find the crawlspace door had swung open. Having dealt with nightmares and all these strange, unexplainable events, my mother was instantly on guard. Keith, too, was far more wary of the house and had no longer been trying to convince my mom it wasn't real, but he hadn't quite begun to believe her either. My mom said that in his generation, it just wasn't done to speak aloud about those types of concerns. I guess I finally loosened it, Keith said, and my mother did a double take. Are you fucking kidding me? She'd asked. That thing opened while we're all the way over here. Just close it. I've been trying to get into this thing for months, Leanne, Keith argued. I'm gonna see what's in it. We need the space. No, we don't, my mother retorted, but she was ignored. Keith approached the door, crouching down to go inside, and my mother, though scared, couldn't abandon her fiancé. She walked over and stood by his side. As Keith slowly tried to crawl inside, my mother grabbed his shoulder and stopped him. What the hell do you think you're doing? She asked. Well, how else am I going to reach inside? Keith replied. Shining a flashlight from his toolbox, Keith described seeing a bunch of boxes and old shit. He said he couldn't see the back wall and wondered aloud how big the space actually was. He wanted to crawl in further, but my mother protested so loudly that he finally gave up on the notion and shut the door. This door was right at the top of the stairs, and now that it had been opened once, my mother said that it was frequently open. They would close it each time, but then, when they tried to go upstairs, would see the open door and the darkness of the crawl space beyond. One day, after the plywood fell from the wall upstairs again, my mom decided to move the notebook in there. She still wasn't sure if she believed in ghosts, but she wanted some kind of proof. She pinned the notebook inside along with a pen on a string. She also decided to leave a quarter in a chalk circle, another tip from a book. A few days later, my mother said she was preparing dinner, and Keith came into the kitchen to help. They'd been chatting and making jokes until Keith started chopping vegetables. My mother made a comment, something about a lady on the news she thinks, when suddenly Keith said, "Why are you talking about that slut? You want to be a whore like her?" My mom said she got chills immediately, and when she looked over, realized that Keith was using the exact same knife that Daryl had threatened Amy with. Remember, Keith was asleep during that fight and had never heard his brother say those words. She told him she'd forgotten something from the store, grabbed the keys, and ran. She didn't return until the next morning, choosing to stay over at a friend's house. She said nothing happened that night, but hearing those words had frightened her to the core. When she asked Keith about it later, he claimed he didn't remember saying it, and was only upset that she'd left in such a hurry. They planned to move, unable to stand the nightmares and uncanny happenings at the house any longer. However, they had to wait until the end of the month. When they had only 1 week left, they were sitting together watching a movie late into the evening when they heard the plywood upstairs fall out of the wall. Keith went to replace it, and my mother went with him, unwilling to sit alone downstairs and wait. Knowing that they'd soon be moving out, Keith actually peeked his head inside the wall, commenting, "I wonder how far this actually goes back." My mother insisted that he not go in, claiming it gave her a sick feeling to even look at the darkness inside the wall. She said it was unnaturally dark. They shone a flashlight in and couldn't see an end to the room, no other end of the wall. In fact, the floor didn't continue all the way inside, but they couldn't see down to the bottom downstairs. It looked like unending darkness. This was the first time either of them had really explored the area. My mother saw that the notebook she'd tacked up, as well as the pen, were lying on the floor, the paper torn, and the quarter was moved from its chalk circle. She began to freak out, demanding they leave right then. That was plenty enough proof for her, and she didn't want to sleep in this house one more night. Keith didn't understand her fear, scolding her for buying into the paranormal bullshit and using a notebook and pen to communicate. My mom argued that the wall was unnatural. With the layout of the house, this wall should have led only straight to the outside. There simply shouldn't have been enough space to create the kind of darkness. Keith insisted it was fine. To prove it, he picked up the quarter, throwing it to hear it hit the bottom. The quarter disappeared into the darkness. It was freezing cold, a draft coming from someplace they couldn't see. My mom and Keith stood there for over a minute before he finally realized they weren't going to hear it hit anything. At that point, even if they did, it would have been too far to be anything other than supernatural. They were both so unsettled that they replaced the plywood and left immediately. They stayed in a hotel for the remainder of the week. returning to pack up their things during daylight. When they'd returned, the plywood was displaced again. When turning in their keys, the owner of the property said that Keith and my mother stayed there longer than anyone else who had rented the house in recent memory. Not only that, but that the people who'd left before them had had some kind of domestic dispute involving a knife and accusations of adultery. My mother researched the property and found that it had been on Native American land, though that wasn't uncommon for the area. She couldn't find any record of crime that occurred there, though she believes the events with the knives were too unlikely to be mere coincidence. She later divorced Keith and moved back to California. These were all the stories. Don't forget to subscribe and like